The human exchange cadet. Lieutenant Jacob Carter stepped off the Vorraki transport ship and into the heart of the Vorraki Prime Military Academy, the most prestigious training facility in the Vorraki Dominion. The air was thick with humidity, carrying the scent of metal, sweat, and the faint tang of ozone from high-powered energy weapons. Around him, towering Vorraki warriors clad in dark red cadet armor regarded him with thinly veiled contempt. Jacob had seen that look before. He had fought against Vorraki troops in the Outer Rim conflicts, and now he was expected to train alongside them. It was no surprise that his presence was unwelcome. He adjusted the strap of his duffel bag, keeping his expression neutral. He had volunteered for this exchange program, knowing full well it would be an uphill battle. The United Galactic Council believed that integrating human soldiers into elite alien academies would foster unity. Jacob wasn't so sure. A low, guttural voice broke through his thoughts. "You are the human." Jacob turned to see a hulking Vorraki officer standing before him. The alien's bio-armored skin glistened under the Academy's artificial sunlight. His four muscular arms crossed over his chest. His glowing yellow eyes bored into Jacob's with something between curiosity and amusement. "Lieutenant Jacob Carter," Jacob said, standing straight. "United Terran Defense Forces." "I am Commander Vorraki," the Vorraki replied. "You will address me as such. Understand this, human. Your presence here is tolerated, not welcomed." Jacob nodded, unsurprised. "Understood, sir." Vorraki turned without another word, motioning for Jacob to follow. As they walked, cadets whispered in the Vorraki tongue, some laughing, others making low, growling sounds, a sign of mockery. Jacob ignored them. He'd been in worse situations. They passed through the Hall of Honor, a massive chamber displaying holograms of the Vorraki's greatest warriors. The academy was built not just to train soldiers, but to forge legends. Jacob couldn't deny a deep respect for their martial culture. Vorraki led him to the cadet barracks, stopping before a metal door. "Your quarters. Do not expect special treatment." Jacob stepped inside and barely held back a grimace. The room was small, bare, and clearly designed for Vorraki physiology. The bed was too long, the seats too wide, and the atmosphere slightly denser than what humans preferred. He set his bag down. "I'll manage." Vorraki grunted. "Your training begins at dawn. Do not be late." With that, he left, the door sliding shut behind him. Jacob exhaled. One day in, and he already had a target on his back. The first test. Morning came too soon. The Vorraki training fields stretched across a massive open courtyard, flanked by obsidian towers and metallic battle rings. Dozens of Vorraki cadets stood in formation, their bulky forms casting long shadows under the twin suns. Jacob joined the group, feeling their eyes burning into him. An instructor stepped forward, a tall Vorraki with a scarred face and jagged armor plating. His voice boomed across the field. "Today, we evaluate your combat ability." He gestured toward a large Vorraki warrior. "Serac, step forward." Serac, easily 7 feet tall, his four powerful arms flexing, smirked at Jacob. "You will fight me, human." Jacob clenched his jaw. "Great. Trial by combat on day 1. The Vorraki formed a circle as Jacob and Serac entered the combat ring. A mechanical drone announced, "Begin." Serac lunged, moving faster than expected for his size. Jacob dodged, narrowly avoiding a swipe from Serac's upper right arm. He countered with a quick jab to the Vorraki's ribs, but it was like punching solid titanium. Serac laughed. "Is that all, little human?" Jacob didn't respond. He kept moving, ducking and weaving, using his agility to avoid the brute force attacks. The Vorraki cadets jeered. "Fight properly." Jacob knew he couldn't match Serac in raw power, so he needed to outthink him. He noticed a slight hesitation in Serac's left step. A weakness. The next time Serac lunged, Jacob sidestepped and swept his leg under Serac's left knee, throwing the warrior off balance. Serac stumbled, just for a second, but Jacob capitalized, driving an elbow into the back of his knee. The Vorraki stumbled forward, landing on his hands. The laughter stopped. Serac snarled and whirled around, but the match had been decided. The instructor raised a hand. Enough. The Vorraki cadets stared at Jacob in silent disbelief. Serac rose slowly, glaring. Clever, human. His expression was unreadable. Then, to Jacob's surprise, he gave a curt nod of respect before walking away. The instructor turned to the cadets. Let this be a lesson. Strength is not the only path to victory. Jacob knew he hadn't truly earned their respect yet, but for the first time since arriving, the whispers of mockery had stopped. He had their attention now, but he also had new enemies. The real challenge begins. Later that night, as Jacob returned to his quarters, his instincts flared. Something wasn't right. As soon as he stepped inside, a heavy weight slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. He rolled, twisting free, and came face to face with 3 Vorraki cadets. Veruin, a broad-shouldered Vorraki with sharp fangs, sneered. You embarrassed Serac today, human. That is unacceptable. Jacob slowly stood, his muscles tensing. It was a fair fight. Veruin's eyes flashed. Vorraki fights are never fair. Jacob barely had time to react before the first punch came. The trial of strength. The first punch came fast, too fast. Jacob barely managed to twist his body as Veruin's fist shot toward his ribs. Even so, the force of the impact sent a sharp jolt of pain through his side. He staggered back, but before he could recover, another Vorraki cadet swung at him. Jacob ducked just in time, feeling the rush of air as the massive fist sailed past his head. He used the opening to drive his elbow into the cadet's exposed ribs, forcing him back with a grunt. 3 against 1. Typical. Fighting in groups now, Jacob growled, shifting into a defensive stance. Not very honorable, is it? Veruin sneered. This isn't about honor, human. You need to learn your place. The biggest of the 3, a hulking Vorraki with deep crimson armor plating, lunged forward. This one was slower, predictable. Jacob sidestepped, bringing his knee up and slamming it into the Vorraki's stomach, making him stumble. But the momentary victory was short-lived. Veruin struck from behind, delivering a crushing blow to Jacob's back. Pain exploded down his spine, and he hit the floor hard, gasping. The Vorraki warriors loomed over him. This is just a warning, Veruin said. Stay in your lane, human. Jacob gritted his teeth, pushing through the pain. He wasn't about to roll over and take it. As Veruin turned, Jacob kicked out, sweeping his legs out from under him. The Vorraki crashed onto the hard metal floor, growling in anger. Jacob sprang to his feet, fists clenched. The other 2 cadets hesitated, clearly not expecting resistance. Before they could react, the door to the barracks slid open with a sharp hiss. A Vorraki instructor stood in the doorway. What is the meaning of this? Commander Vorshun's deep voice rumbled through the room. His glowing yellow eyes swept over the scene. Jacob breathing hard, 3 Vorraki cadets standing over him. Veruin quickly stepped back, schooling his expression. Just training, Commander. Vorshun's gaze lingered for a long, tense moment before he finally grunted. Get out. Veruin and his cronies didn't argue. They slipped out of the room without another word. Jacob exhaled, rolling his shoulders. He could already feel the bruises forming. Vorshun regarded him with an unreadable expression. You held your own. Impressive. Jacob wiped a trickle of blood from his lip. Thanks. The Vorraki commander crossed his arms. You are being watched, human. Many here believe you do not belong. They will test you, again and again. Jacob met his gaze. Then I'll just keep proving them wrong. Vorshun stared at him for a moment longer before nodding. We shall see. Without another word, he turned and left. Jacob sat on his bunk, muscles aching but resolve unshaken. He had come here to prove humanity's place among the stars. He wasn't about to back down now. The right approving. The next morning, the academy's central courtyard buzzed with activity. Hundreds of cadets lined up in formation beneath the towering spires of Vorraki architecture. Massive banners depicting Vorraki warlords hung from the walls, and battle drones hovered in the air, recording everything. Jacob stood among the other cadets, his ribs still sore from the night before. A high-ranking Vorraki officer stepped onto the raised platform before them. His armor gleamed under the twin suns, and his battle-scarred face was a testament to years of combat. "I am Master Gortel, and today you will face the rite of proving, the trial that determines your worth as warriors." His piercing gaze scanned the gathered cadets. "Weakness will not be tolerated. You will either rise to the challenge, or you will fall." A holographic display flickered to life behind him, revealing the parameters of the trial. Objective: survive and complete the combat course. Work as a team. Defeat the training enemies. The challenge would take place in the arena, a high-tech combat simulator that could replicate real-world battle conditions. Jacob could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just training, it was a test of who truly belonged in the academy. He was assigned to a 4-member squad. To his relief, Koresh, one of the few Vorraki cadets who didn't outright hate him, was on his team. "We're up against some tough competition," Koresh muttered as they made their way into the arena chamber. Jacob smirked. "Good. I like a challenge." Into the arena. The massive training arena rumbled as the simulation engaged. The floor beneath them shifted, metal plates reconfiguring to form a war zone, complete with rocky terrain, high-tech barricades, and roving combat drones armed with stun weapons. A loud klaxon blared. The trial had begun. Their squad moved cautiously, scanning the terrain. Jacob quickly took charge. "We need a strategy," he said. "These combat drones are programmed to take out the weakest link first." Koresh raised a ridged brow. "And that would be you, human." Jacob grinned. "Exactly. So let's use that." He sprinted forward, deliberately exposing himself. The drones locked onto him instantly, moving in for the kill. Koresh and the others took the opportunity to strike, launching a coordinated assault from behind cover. They took down the first wave of drones in seconds. Jacob ducked behind a barricade, catching his breath. So far, so good. But then the second wave hit. Larger drones, faster, armed with shock blasters. One of their teammates panicked and broke formation, running out of cover. "Stay in position," Jacob shouted, but it was too late. A drone fired, and the Vorraki cadet went down, his armor sparking from the impact. "Damn it," Koresh growled. "He's out." Jacob knew they had to act fast. The drones were adapting. "Time for Plan B," Jacob muttered. He grabbed a fallen Vorraki energy staff and charged forward. The drones locked onto him again, but this time Jacob was ready. He dodged between their attacks, weaving and striking in quick, precise movements. Koresh followed close behind, using the distraction to take them down. One by one, the drones fell. The klaxon blared again. Trial complete. Jacob exhaled, chest rising and falling. Around them, Vorraki cadets stared, some in surprise, others in anger. Koresh clapped him on the back. "You might actually survive this place, human." Jacob smirked. "I planned to." But he knew this victory wouldn't change the minds of everyone here. If anything, it would paint an even bigger target on his back. And the real trials were just beginning. The arena's wrath. The arena was alive with anticipation. The circular combat pit, surrounded by thousands of roaring Vorraki spectators, was now shifting, its metal plates reconfiguring into an unpredictable, treacherous battlefield. Platforms rose and fell at random, while energy barriers flickered ominously at the edges, ready to punish those who strayed too far. Jacob clenched his fists, his ribs still aching from the previous trial. Across from him, Veruin cracked his knuckles, his reptilian face twisted into a sneer. The Vorraki warrior was bigger, stronger, and accustomed to this brutal environment. He wanted revenge for the humiliation of the previous day. This wasn't just a test for him. It was an opportunity to make an example out of the human who had dared to challenge Vorraki's superiority. "You got lucky before, human," Veruin growled, his forked tongue flicking out between sharp teeth. "Luck runs out." Jacob rolled his shoulders, keeping his body loose. "Then I guess we'll see how long mine lasts." Master Gortel raised a massive hand. "Begin." The instant the words left his mouth, Veruin was moving. He came at Jacob like a charging beast. his immense frame closing the distance in a split second. Jacob had barely enough time to sidestep before a massive fist whistled past his face, striking the metal floor with a loud clang. Fast. Too fast. Jacob knew he couldn't match Veruin in raw power. The Vorraki warrior was built like a tank, with thick, scaled armor plating covering his entire body. But what he lacked in raw strength, he could make up for with agility and strategy. He had fought larger opponents before, though, admittedly, none as massive as this. He dodged left, then right, keeping on the move. But the shifting platforms made it impossible to maintain steady footing. Veruin wasn't struggling nearly as much. His lower center of gravity gave him an advantage, and he took every opportunity to try to corner Jacob. The crowd roared every time Veruin swung at him, cheering their champion. Then, Jacob saw his opening. As Veruin lunged again, Jacob dropped to the floor, sweeping out his leg. Veruin staggered, losing his balance on the unstable platform. Jacob didn't wait for him to recover. He rushed forward and slammed an elbow into the Vorraki's side. A sickening crunch followed. Veruin snarled in pain, but caught himself just in time, grabbing Jacob by the arm. With a roar, he hurled Jacob across the arena. Jacob hit the ground hard, skidding towards the crackling energy field. The heat from the force barrier sizzled against his skin, and he barely managed to push himself up before rolling out of the way. His breathing was ragged. His ribs felt like they were on fire. Veruin stomped toward him. "Time to end this," the Vorraki growled. Jacob's mind raced. He wasn't getting out of this through brute strength. He had to outthink Veruin, use his momentum and arrogance against him. Then he saw the shifting platforms. That was it. Veruin charged again, eager for the finishing blow. Jacob stayed put this time, waiting until the last possible second before sidestepping and kicking out at Veruin's already injured leg. Veruin let out a roar of pain as he stumbled, but Jacob wasn't done. He grabbed Veruin by the arm, twisted, and used the momentum to pivot and slam his opponent forward. Right as the platform tilted downward, Veruin lost his footing completely. Jacob watched as the Vorraki warrior toppled backward. His massive body hit the energy field with a crackling explosion of light and sound. A roar of surprise and anger filled the arena as the field shocked Veruin, hurling him backward into a heap. The crowd fell silent. A long, tense pause followed before the arena's system finally blared a metallic announcement. Combat trial complete. Human cadet, Victor. Shocked murmurs spread through the audience. The Vorraki weren't used to seeing one of their own beaten, especially by an outsider. Jacob staggered to his feet, clutching his ribs. Veruin groaned from the ground, but did not rise. Koresh approached, staring at Jacob with an unreadable expression. Then he let out a low chuckle and pounded Jacob on the shoulder. "You really are a stubborn one, human," he said with something almost like respect. Jacob smirked through the pain. "Took you long enough to notice." Gortel studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Perhaps there is more to your kind than we thought." Jacob could feel the eyes of the entire arena on him. No more whispers about the weak human. No more scoffs. Just acknowledgement. As he stood there, chest rising and falling, he knew one thing. This was far from over. Breaking the chains. The murmurs in the crowd had not faded. Even as the arena's energy fields powered down, the Vorraki cadets still seemed stunned by what they had just witnessed. A human had defeated Veruin, one of their finest. It was unheard of, unacceptable. Jacob stood on unsteady feet, his body aching from the brutal fight. He knew he had won, but the weight of the moment hung over him. This wasn't just about victory in some combat trial. This had changed everything. Master Gortel descended from the viewing platform, his heavy footfalls echoing across the silent arena. His 4 yellow eyes studied Jacob with something new. Not contempt, not amusement, consideration. "You fought well, human," Gortel finally said. His deep voice carried through the arena, breaking the tense silence. "And yet, you are an outsider. You have proven strength, but strength alone does not earn a place among us." Jacob straightened. "Then what does?" A rumble of interest passed through the watching cadets. Gortel stepped closer, looming over Jacob. Loyalty, he said. Honor. The willingness to stand for something greater than yourself. Jacob clenched his fists. I just took down one of your best. I've bled in your trials. I fought by your side. How is that not enough? Gortel let the silence stretch. Then, without warning, he gestured toward the entrance of the arena. The heavy gates rumbled open. A group of Vorraki warriors marched inside, dragging someone behind them. Veruin, the Vorraki warrior, looked battered, his scales singed from the energy field. But there was no defiance in his gaze, only simmering rage. The warriors dropped him at Gortel's feet. Veruin broke our code, Gortel said. He allowed personal vendetta to cloud his judgment, shaming himself in combat. In our traditions, such a failure is not overlooked. Jacob's stomach twisted. He knew where this was going. His punishment must be delivered, Gortel continued, by the one who bested him. A Vorraki warrior stepped forward, handing Jacob a ceremonial blade. The weapon was long, curved, and wickedly sharp. Jacob's pulse pounded in his ears. You want me to kill him? Gortel's expression was unreadable. This is our way. Veruin lifted his chin, staring at Jacob with something between anger and resignation. He expected this. He accepted it. Jacob looked around at the gathered warriors. This was their tradition, their law, but it wasn't his. His grip tightened on the hilt of the blade. He had fought to survive. He had played their game by their rules. But this was different. Jacob took a deep breath and threw the blade to the ground. The metal clattered against the arena floor, the sound echoing through the silent chamber. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Shocked murmurs followed. Gortel's eyes narrowed. You defy our law? Jacob squared his shoulders. I came here to prove myself, to earn my place, not to execute a man who fought for his honor. He glanced at Veruin. He's beaten. That should be enough. Veruin's eyes widened slightly, but he said nothing. The tension in the arena crackled like a live wire. Then, to Jacob's surprise, Gortel smiled. Not in amusement, but in something that almost looked like approval. You are not Vorraki, Gortel said. You never will be. And yet, you understand something our kind often forgets. He turned to the watching cadets. Strength is not just in power. It is in restraint. The murmurs in the crowd shifted in tone. Where there had been disbelief, there was now something else. Something Jacob couldn't quite name. Gortel gestured to Veruin. Rise. The warrior hesitated, then pushed himself to his feet, glaring at Jacob. There was still anger in his gaze, but also something that had not been there before. Respect. You spared me, Veruin said, his voice low. Why? Jacob smirked. Because you're not worth killing. Veruin blinked, then let out a sharp, barking laugh. The tension snapped like a broken wire. Gortel nodded once. Perhaps there's a place for you here after all. Jacob let out a slow breath. He had come here as an outsider, as a curiosity, but now he had done something far greater than simply winning a fight. He had changed the game. The end.